You know, there's a moment in every entrepreneur's journey that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. The wind is howling, the ground is crumbling beneath your feet, and everyone you love is standing behind you. Not to catch you, but to tell you how crazy you are for even thinking about jumping. That was me not so long ago. My family, the people whose opinions I valued most, didn't just doubt my startup, they mocked it. They laughed at my business plan over dinner, rolled their eyes when I talked about my vision, and made jokes about the next Steve Jobs every time I walked into the room. It stung. But what stung even more was the realization that their laughter wasn't just about my idea, it was about me. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was working a stable job, the kind that makes parents proud and neighbors envious. Good salary, benefits, a clear path to retirement. But every day, I felt like I was living someone else's life. I had this itch, this relentless urge to build something of my own. I'd always been fascinated by the way technology could solve real problems, and had spent years tinkering with ideas in my spare time. But the idea that finally grabbed me was different. It kept me up at night, filled my notebooks, and made my heart race every time I thought about it. I knew deep down that this was the one. So I did what every rational person does when they're about to make a life-altering decision. I told my family. I expected concern, maybe a little skepticism, but what I got was a full-blown comedy roast. My dad, who'd spent his life working his way up the corporate ladder, couldn't hide his disbelief. You're going to throw away a perfectly good job for what exactly? An app? My mom, ever the pragmatist, started sending me job listings, just in case. My siblings, who'd always been my biggest cheerleaders, suddenly became my harshest critics. You? A CEO? Good luck with that. The message was clear. They didn't believe in my idea, and they definitely didn't believe in me. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It's fuel. Every joke, every dismissive comment, every eye roll, it all became kindling for the fire inside me. I started working on my startup in secret, pouring every spare minute into research, development, and planning. I read everything I could get my hands on, from business books to case studies to stories of entrepreneurs who'd made it against the odds. I reached out to mentors, joined online communities, and started building a network of people who actually understood what I was trying to do. Contrast that with my family's world. They saw stability as the ultimate goal, risk as something to be avoided at all costs. Their lives were built on predictability, on following the rules, on doing what was expected. My world, on the other hand, was chaos. It was late nights, early mornings, and constant uncertainty. It was pitching my idea to anyone who would listen, facing rejection after rejection, and learning to pick myself up every time I got knocked down. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The first real test came when I launched my MVP, the minimum viable product. It was rough around the edges, but it worked. I remember the first time a stranger signed up and paid for my service. It was a tiny transaction, barely enough to buy a cup of coffee. But to me, it was proof. Proof that my idea had value, that someone out there believed in what I was building. I wanted to share the news with my family, to show them that I wasn't crazy, but I held back. I knew they wouldn't see it the way I did. To them, it would just be another reason to worry. As the months went by, the gap between my world and theirs grew wider. I stopped talking about my startup at family gatherings. I smiled and nodded when they asked about my real job, and I learned to deflect their questions with vague answers. But inside, I was more determined than ever. Every small win felt like a victory, not just for my business, but for my belief in myself. Then came the setbacks. The server crashed on launch day, a key partner backed out at the last minute. I ran out of money and had to max out my credit cards just to keep the lights on. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my family had been right all along. Maybe I was in over my head. Maybe I should have played it safe. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the laughter, the jokes, the disbelief. I wasn't just building a startup, I was proving a point. And then something incredible happened. The product started to catch on. Word of mouth spread, and suddenly I was getting emails from people who loved what I'd built. Investors started reaching out, asking for meetings. I landed my first big client, and the revenue started to climb. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right path, not just in my own eyes, but in the eyes of the world. But the real turning point came at a family dinner, almost a year to the day after I'd first shared my idea. My dad, who'd barely spoken to me about my startup since that night, pulled me aside. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "I've been watching what you're doing. I didn't get it before, but I see it now. I'm proud of you." My mom started bragging about me to her friends. My siblings, who'd once mocked my ambition, started asking for advice on their own projects. And then the unthinkable happened. They wanted in. They wanted to invest. At first, I thought they were joking. After all the teasing, the skepticism, the endless reminders to be realistic, it was almost surreal to hear my family talk about investing in my company. My dad, the same man who once called my idea a pipe dream, was now asking about equity and growth projections. My mom, who had quietly worried about my future, wanted to know how she could help. My siblings, who had once rolled their eyes at my ambition, were suddenly eager to be part of the journey. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who had doubted me most were now the ones clamoring to get a piece of the action. But before I get into how I handled their newfound enthusiasm, let's talk about what changed. It wasn't just the numbers, though, to be fair, the numbers were finally starting to look impressive. It was the shift in perception. My family had always valued security, but now they were seeing the rewards of risk. They saw the press coverage, the testimonials from happy customers, the growing list of clients. They saw me, not as the reckless dreamer they'd feared, but as someone who had built something real from nothing. The contrast between their old view and the new reality was stark, and it forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about success. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little vindicated. For so long, I'd carried the weight of their doubts, using it as motivation to push through the hard times. Now, as they lined up to invest, I felt a mix of pride and caution. It would have been easy to let my ego take over, to gloat or hold a grudge, but I knew that wasn't the right move. If there's one thing entrepreneurship teaches you, it's humility. The market doesn't care about your feelings, and neither do the challenges you face. Success isn't about proving people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. So I took a step back and thought carefully about what to do next. On one hand, having my family invest could be a powerful way to bring us closer together. It would show them that I valued their support, even if it came late. On the other hand, mixing family and business is always risky. I'd heard horror stories of startups torn apart by family drama, of relationships ruined by money and misunderstandings. I didn't want that for us. I decided to treat my family like any other potential investor. I set up a formal meeting, complete with a pitch deck, financial projections, and a clear explanation of the risks involved. I wanted them to understand that this wasn't a sure thing, that startups are inherently risky, and that they should only invest what they could afford to lose. It was a strange experience pitching my own family, but it was also empowering. For the first time, I felt like they were seeing me as a professional, not just as their son or sibling. The meeting went better than I could have hoped. My dad asked tough questions, but I could tell he was impressed by how much I'd learned. My mom listened intently, taking notes and nodding along. My siblings, who had always been quick with a joke, were suddenly all business. By the end of the meeting, they were ready to invest, not just with their money, but with their trust. It was a turning point, not just for my startup, but for our family. Looking back, I realized that their skepticism wasn't really about me. It was about fear. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of watching someone they loved take a risk that could end in disaster. They wanted to protect me, even if it meant holding me back. But as they watched me navigate the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, they saw that I was stronger than they'd realized. They saw that I could handle the setbacks, learn from my mistakes, and keep moving forward. In a way, their doubts had forced me to become the person I needed to be to succeed. The contrast between where we started and where we ended up couldn't be more dramatic. We went from laughter and disbelief to respect and partnership. My family, once my harshest critics, became my biggest supporters. They started sharing my story with their friends, bragging about my achievements, and even offering to help with the business in practical ways. My dad used his connections to introduce me to potential clients. My mom helped with bookkeeping and customer service. My siblings brainstormed marketing ideas and helped spread the word on social media. But perhaps the most important change was in our relationship. We learned to communicate more openly, to listen to each other's concerns, and to celebrate each other's successes. The experience brought us closer together, not just as a family, but as a team. We learned that it's okay to disagree, to challenge each other, and to push each other to be better. We learned that support doesn't always look like agreement, and that sometimes the people who doubt you the most are the ones who care the most. Of course, the journey wasn't over. Startups are a roller coaster, and there were still plenty of challenges ahead. But now I faced them with the knowledge that I wasn't alone. I had my family behind me, not just as investors, but as believers. That made all the difference. As I reflect on everything that's happened, I realize that the real lesson isn't about business or money. It's about resilience, about believing in yourself when no one else does, and about the power of persistence. It's about understanding that doubt and criticism are part of the process, and that the only way to silence your critics is to keep moving forward. It's about turning mockery into motivation, and skepticism into support. If you're watching this and you're facing your own doubters, whether it's your family, your friends, or even your own inner voice, remember this. Their doubts don't define you. Your actions do. The only way to prove them wrong is to prove yourself right. And when you do, don't be surprised if they come knocking, asking for a piece of what you've built. The irony of it all still makes me smile. The same kitchen table where my family once laughed at my crazy idea had now become the unofficial headquarters for our new family business meetings. My dad, who used to scoff at the word startup, was now reading articles about venture capital and asking me to explain terms like runway and burn rate. My mom, who once worried I'd end up broke and jobless, was now helping me organize customer feedback and streamline our support process. My siblings, who had once joked about my fantasy CEO life, were now brainstorming ways to help the company go viral on social media. The transformation was almost cinematic. But as much as I appreciated their support, I knew I had to be careful. Family dynamics are complicated, and money has a way of magnifying every little tension. I set clear boundaries from the start. I made it clear that, as investors, they would get regular updates and have a say in big decisions, but day-to-day operations were my responsibility. I wanted their support, not their micromanagement. It was a delicate balance, but I was determined to make it work. The business itself was evolving rapidly. What started as a simple idea had grown into something much bigger. We were attracting new customers every week, and our user base was expanding beyond anything I'd imagined. I hired my first employee, a developer who shared my passion for the project and brought a fresh perspective to the team. We started getting attention from industry blogs and even landed a feature in a major tech publication. Suddenly, people who had never heard of us were reaching out, asking how they could get involved. With growth came new challenges. Scaling a startup is a different beast than launching one. Suddenly, I was dealing with issues I'd never even considered: server capacity, customer retention, hiring, and of course, cash flow. Every day brought a new set of problems to solve, and the stakes felt higher than ever. But I thrived on the pressure. There's something exhilarating about knowing that every decision you make could be the difference between success and failure. Contrast that with my family's world, where routines were predictable and risks were minimized. They were used to steady paychecks, clear job descriptions, and annual performance reviews. My world was a whirlwind of uncertainty, where the only constant was change. But slowly, I saw them start to understand. They began to appreciate the thrill of the unknown, the satisfaction of solving problems on the fly, and the pride that comes from building something from scratch. One of the most rewarding moments came when my dad, the ultimate skeptic, admitted that he'd been wrong. We were sitting in the backyard watching the sunset after a long day. He turned to me and said, "I never thought I'd say this, but I admire what you've done. You took a risk I never would have taken, and you made it work. I'm proud of you." It was a simple statement, but it meant everything to me. For the first time, I felt like he saw me not just as his child, but as an equal. My mom, too, found her own way to contribute. She started organizing customer appreciation events, sending handwritten thank you notes to our most loyal users, and even baking cookies for our team meetings. Her warmth and attention to detail became part of our company culture, and our customers noticed. We started getting emails from people who said they felt like part of a family, not just another transaction. That sense of community became one of our biggest strengths. My siblings, meanwhile, brought their own unique talents to the table. My older brother, who worked in marketing, helped us craft a brand story that resonated with our audience. My younger sister, a graphic designer, revamped our website and created a visual identity that set us apart from the competition. Even my cousin, who lived across the country, started spreading the word to her network. It was as if the whole family had caught the entrepreneurial bug. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were disagreements, of course. Sometimes my dad would push too hard for a conservative approach, worried about losing his investment. My siblings would argue about the best way to spend our marketing budget. My mom would get anxious about negative reviews and want to respond to every single one personally. We had to learn to navigate these conflicts, to separate family from business, and to trust each other's expertise. Through it all, I kept reminding myself of why I started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong or making money, it was about creating something meaningful, something that could make a difference in people's lives. Every time a customer sent us a thank you note or shared a success story, it reminded me that we were on the right track. The contrast between where we started and where we were now was striking. We had gone from a family divided by doubt to a team united by purpose. The same people who once mocked my ambition were now my partners, my collaborators, and my biggest cheerleaders. We had learned to embrace risk, to celebrate failure as a stepping stone to success, and to support each other through the ups and downs. Looking back, I realized that the journey was never just about the startup. It was about growth, personal, professional, and relational. It was about learning to believe in myself even when no one else did. It was about finding the courage to take risks, the resilience to bounce back from setbacks, and the humility to accept help when I needed it. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's this. Don't let other people's doubts define your limits. The people who love you may not always understand your vision, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone, to trust your instincts, and to keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. And if you're lucky, you might just inspire the people around you to take their own leap of faith. As the business continued to grow, so did the complexity of our challenges. The early days of hustling for every customer and celebrating every small win had given way to a new reality. We were now responsible for a growing team, a larger customer base, and a reputation that was starting to precede us. The stakes were higher and the pressure was real, but with every new milestone, I felt a deeper sense of purpose, not just for myself, but for everyone who had come along for the ride, especially my family. One of the most profound shifts was in how my family viewed risk. In the beginning, risk was the enemy. It was the thing that kept them up at night, the shadow that loomed over every conversation about my future. But as they became more involved in the business, they started to see risk differently. They saw it as an opportunity, a chance to grow, to learn, to achieve something extraordinary. My dad, who had always played it safe, began to appreciate the calculated risks we took. He started reading business books, attending startup events with me, and even mentoring some of our younger employees. It was as if he had discovered a new side of himself, one that had been dormant for years. My mom, too, found a new sense of confidence. She became our unofficial head of customer relations, handling everything from support tickets to event planning. She took pride in every positive review, every thank you note, every customer who said they had made a difference in their life. She started to see herself not just as a supportive parent, but as a vital part of something bigger. Her transformation was inspiring, not just to me, but to everyone on our team. My siblings, meanwhile, brought their own unique talents to the table.
My older brother, who worked in marketing, helped us craft a brand story that resonated with our audience. My younger sister, a graphic designer, revamped our website and created a visual identity that set us apart from the competition. Even my cousin, who lived across the country, started spreading the word to her network. It was as if the whole family had caught the entrepreneurial bug. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were disagreements, of course. Sometimes my dad would push too hard for a conservative approach, worried about losing his investment. My siblings would argue about the best way to spend our marketing budget. My mom would get anxious about negative reviews and want to respond to every single one personally. We had to learn to navigate these conflicts, to separate family from business, and to trust each other's expertise. Through it all, I kept reminding myself of why I started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about proving my family wrong or making money, it was about creating something meaningful, something that could make a difference in people's lives. Every time a customer sent us a thank you note or shared a success story, it reminded me that we were on the right track.
The contrast between where we started and where we were now was striking. We had gone from a family divided by doubt to a team united by purpose. The same people who once mocked my ambition were now my partners, my collaborators, and my biggest cheerleaders. We had learned to embrace risk, to celebrate failure as a stepping stone to success, and to support each other through the ups and downs. Looking back, I realized that the journey was never just about the startup. It was about growth, personal, professional, and relational. It was about learning to believe in myself, even when no one else did. It was about finding the courage to take risks, the resilience to bounce back from setbacks, and the humility to accept help when I needed it. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my story, it's this: don't let other people's doubts define your limits. The people who love you may not always understand your vision, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes you have to be willing to stand alone, to trust your instincts, and to keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. And if you're lucky, you might just inspire the people around you to take their own leap of faith. As the business continued to grow, so did the complexity of our challenges. The early days of hustling for every customer and celebrating every small win had given way to a new reality. We were now responsible for a growing team, a larger customer base, and a reputation that was starting to precede us. The stakes were higher and the pressure was real. But with every new milestone, I felt a deeper sense of purpose, not just for myself, but for everyone who had come along for the ride, especially my family. One of the most profound shifts was in how my family viewed risk. In the beginning, risk was the enemy. It was the thing that kept them up at night, the shadow that loomed over every conversation about my future. But as they became more involved in the business, they started to see risk differently. They saw it as an opportunity, a chance to grow, to learn, to achieve something extraordinary. My dad, who had always played it safe, began to appreciate the calculated risks we took. He started reading business books, attending startup events with me, and even mentoring some of our younger employees. It was as if he had discovered a new side of himself, one that had been dormant for years. My mom, too, found a new sense of confidence. She became our unofficial head of customer relations, handling everything from support tickets to event planning. She took pride in every positive review, every thank you note, every customer who said we had made a difference in their life. She started to see herself not just as a supportive parent, but as a vital part of something bigger. Her transformation was inspiring not just to me, but to everyone on our team. My siblings, meanwhile, became my sounding boards. We had long, late-night conversations about strategy, marketing, and growth. We debated, we disagreed, we challenged each other, but always with the shared goal of making the business better. Their perspectives, shaped by their own experiences and expertise, helped me see things I would have missed on my own. We became more than just family. We became partners. But with growth came new challenges. We had to hire more people, build new systems, and find ways to scale without losing the personal touch that had set us apart. There were moments when it felt overwhelming, when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush me. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered how far we had come. I remembered the laughter, the doubt, the skepticism, and how we had turned it all into fuel for our success. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of adaptability. The startup world moves fast, and what works today might not work tomorrow. We had to be willing to pivot, to experiment, to fail and try again. There were times when we launched new features that flopped, or invested in marketing campaigns that didn't deliver. But instead of seeing these as failures, we saw them as opportunities to learn. We analyzed what went wrong, made adjustments, and came back stronger. This mindset of continuous improvement became part of our company culture. We encouraged everyone on the team to share their ideas, to take risks, to challenge the status quo. We celebrated not just our successes, but our failures, because every failure brought us one step closer to getting it right. My family, once so afraid of making mistakes, began to embrace this philosophy. They saw that perfection was impossible, but progress was always within reach. As our reputation grew, so did the interest from outside investors. We started getting calls from venture capitalists, angel investors, and even a few big-name companies interested in partnerships. It was flattering, but also daunting. I knew that bringing in outside money would mean giving up some control, and I wanted to make sure we stayed true to our vision. My family, now seasoned investors themselves, helped me weigh the pros and cons. We had honest conversations about what we wanted for the future, about how much we were willing to risk, and about what success really meant to us. In the end, we decided to take on a small round of funding from investors who shared our values. It was a strategic move, one that allowed us to accelerate our growth without compromising our mission. The process was intense, endless meetings, negotiations, and due diligence. But it was also a validation of everything we had built. We weren't just a scrappy startup anymore. We were a company with real potential. Through it all, the support of my family was unwavering. They celebrated every win, comforted me through every setback, and reminded me of why we started this journey in the first place. Their belief in me, once so hard won, had become a source of strength. It was a reminder that no matter how tough things got, I wasn't alone. Looking back, I realized that the journey was never just about building a business. It was about building trust, resilience, and a sense of shared purpose. It was about transforming doubt into belief, fear into courage, and skepticism into support. It was about proving, not just to my family, but to myself, that anything is possible with enough determination and heart. If you're watching this and you're facing your own uphill battle, remember, the people who doubt you today might be the ones cheering you on tomorrow. Don't let their skepticism hold you back. Use it as motivation. Let it push you to work harder, to learn more, to become the best version of yourself. And when you finally succeed, don't forget to bring them along for the ride. Because in the end, success is sweeter when it's shared with the people who matter most. As our company entered its next phase, I found myself reflecting on how much both the business and my family had changed. The journey from mockery to investment wasn't just a story of financial turnaround. It was a story of personal transformation, of relationships tested and ultimately strengthened by adversity. The contrast between where we started and where we stood now was almost unbelievable. I often thought back to those early days when every family dinner felt like a trial, every conversation a subtle reminder that I was gambling with my future. Now, those same dinners were filled with excitement, ideas, and a sense of shared purpose. But success brought new challenges, and I quickly learned that growth can be just as daunting as failure. With more customers, more employees, and more attention, the pressure to deliver was greater than ever. Every decision felt weightier, every mistake more costly. There were days when I longed for the simplicity of those early struggles, when the only thing at stake was my own pride. Now, I was responsible for a team, for investors, including my own family, and for a growing community of customers who depended on us. One of the biggest challenges was maintaining our company culture as we scaled. In the beginning, it was easy to foster a sense of camaraderie and shared mission. We were a small, scrappy team, united by a common goal and a willingness to do whatever it took to succeed. But as we grew, it became harder to keep everyone aligned.
New hires brought fresh perspectives, but also new expectations and ways of working. I realized that if we wanted to preserve what made us special, we needed to be intentional about our values and our vision. This was another area where my family's involvement proved invaluable. My mom, with her natural warmth and empathy, became a mentor to new team members, helping them feel welcome and supported. My dad, with his experience in management, helped us develop processes and systems that allowed us to scale without losing our soul. My siblings, always quick to spot potential pitfalls, kept us grounded and focused on what mattered most. Together, we worked to create an environment where everyone felt valued, where ideas were encouraged, and where failure was seen as a stepping stone to success. But even with a strong team and a clear vision, there were moments of doubt. The startup world is notoriously unpredictable, and there were times when it felt like everything was on the line. We faced fierce competition, unexpected setbacks, and the constant pressure to innovate. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I was really cut out for this, if I had what it took to lead a company through the ups and downs of rapid growth. In those moments, I drew strength from my family's journey. I remembered how far we had come, how we had turned doubt into belief, fear into courage, and skepticism into support. I learned to embrace uncertainty, to see it not as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow and adapt. One of the most powerful lessons I learned was the importance of vulnerability. As a founder, it's easy to feel like you have to have all the answers, to project confidence even when you're unsure. But I discovered that true leadership is about being honest, about your fears, your mistakes, and your need for help. When I opened up to my team and my family about the challenges we were facing, I found that they were more than willing to step up and support me. Their trust and encouragement gave me the courage to keep going even when the path ahead was unclear.
As our company continued to grow, we started to attract attention from the broader business community. We were invited to speak at conferences, featured in industry publications, and even approached by larger companies interested in partnerships or acquisitions. It was both exciting and overwhelming. Suddenly, we were no longer the underdogs. We were a company to watch, a potential disruptor in our industry. With this new visibility came new opportunities, but also new risks. We had to be careful not to lose sight of our core mission, not to get swept up in the hype or distracted by shiny opportunities that didn't align with our values. My family, once so wary of risk, became my sounding board, helping me weigh the pros and cons of every major decision. Their perspective, shaped by their own experiences and by the journey we had taken together, helped me stay grounded and focused. Looking back, I realized that the greatest gift my family gave me wasn't their investment or their support, it was their belief in my ability to grow and adapt. They taught me that it's okay to start from a place of doubt, that skepticism can be a catalyst for growth, and that the most important thing is to keep moving forward, no matter how uncertain the path may be. If you're watching this and you're facing your own challenges, whether it's skepticism from loved ones, setbacks in your business, or doubts about your own abilities, remember that growth is a journey, not a destination. The people who doubt you today may become your biggest supporters tomorrow, but only if you have the courage to keep going, to learn from your mistakes, and to stay true to your vision. In the end, the story of my startup isn't just about business. It's about family, resilience, and the power of belief. It's about turning mockery into motivation, doubt into determination, and skepticism into support. It's about proving, not just to others, but to yourself, that you are capable of achieving more than you ever imagined. As our company matured, I found myself reflecting more deeply on the journey, not just the milestones and metrics, but the emotional landscape we'd all traversed. The contrast between the early days of isolation and the present sense of unity was striking. I remembered the sting of my family's laughter, the awkward silences at dinner, the feeling of being the odd one out. Now those memories felt distant, almost like scenes from someone else's life. In their place was a new reality,
a family transformed by shared struggle, mutual respect, and a collective sense of achievement. But the truth is, the journey was never linear. Even as we celebrated our successes, there were setbacks that tested our resolve. There were product launches that flopped, partnerships that fell through, and moments when the numbers just didn't add up. Each time, I braced myself for the old doubts to resurface, for my family to question whether we'd made the right choices. But instead, I found something different. Instead of criticism, there was collaboration. Instead of, "I told you so," there was, "How can we help?" That shift was more valuable than any investment. One of the most profound changes was in how we handled failure. In the past, failure was something to fear, something to avoid at all costs. My family's initial skepticism was rooted in a desire to protect me from disappointment. But as they became more involved in the business, they saw firsthand that failure was not the end. It was a necessary part of the process. We learned to analyze our mistakes, to extract lessons, and to pivot quickly. This mindset didn't just make us better entrepreneurs, it made us stronger as a family. I remember one particularly tough quarter when our growth stalled. We'd invested heavily in a new feature that customers simply didn't want. The feedback was brutal, and the financial hit was significant. Old fears crept in. What if this was the beginning of the end? What if we'd finally bitten off more than we could chew? But instead of panicking, we regrouped. My dad suggested a series of customer interviews to understand where we'd gone wrong. My mom organized a team retreat to boost morale. My siblings dove into the data looking for patterns and insights. Together, we turned a setback into a springboard for innovation. That experience taught me the value of resilience, not just as an individual, but as a team. It's easy to stay positive when things are going well, but true character is revealed in adversity. My family, once so wary of risk, had become experts at navigating uncertainty. They understood that the path to success is rarely straight, and that every detour is an opportunity to learn and grow. As our reputation grew, so did our impact. We started to hear from customers whose lives had been changed by our product. Some had launched their own businesses using our platform, others had found solutions to problems they'd struggled with for years. These stories became our North Star, reminding us why we started in the first place. They also gave my family a sense of pride and ownership that went beyond financial returns. We weren't just building a company, we were making a difference. With success came new opportunities, and we faced decisions that would shape the future of the business. Should we expand into new markets? Should we diversify our product line? Should we consider acquisition offers from larger companies? Each choice came with its own risks and rewards, and the stakes felt higher than ever. But now, instead of feeling alone in these decisions, I had a trusted circle of advisors, my family. Their perspectives, shaped by our shared journey, helped me see the bigger picture and make choices that aligned with our values. One of the most rewarding aspects of this journey was watching my family grow alongside the business. My dad, once the ultimate corporate man, discovered a passion for mentoring young entrepreneurs. He started volunteering at local business incubators, sharing the lessons he'd learned from our experience. My mom, who had always been the heart of our family, became the heart of our company culture. She organized community events, built relationships with customers, and created a sense of belonging that set us apart from our competitors. My siblings, each with their own talents and interests, found ways to contribute that played to their strengths. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. We learned to communicate more openly, to support each other through setbacks, and to celebrate each other's successes. We discovered that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness, and that the best teams are built on trust and mutual respect. The journey forced us to confront our fears, to challenge our assumptions, and to grow in ways we never expected. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success is never a solo act. Behind every achievement is a network of support, a community of people who believe in you even when you doubt yourself. For me, that network started with my family. even if their belief took time to develop. Their initial skepticism, while painful, pushed me to work harder, to prove myself, and to build something truly meaningful. Their eventual support became the foundation on which our success was built.